Welcome back to part 13 of the OC story with Darrow the assassin and Erasmus the prince. Let's carry on where we left off. It was Darrow who came to first, and for a moment he didn't know where he was. Pale feathers fell all around him, and he sat up, coughing. Water dripped from his lips. Tears were still streaming down his face. But he couldn't remember why. All he felt was an aching, gripping sadness. As he watched, blinking blue eyes, the tears rippled on the dirt at his feet, etching themselves over the frost-bitten grass, dragging droplets towards the edge of the lake and merging with the waters there. The sadness kept on gripping his heart, and he could not explain it. It was as though his heart was breaking inside his chest. Visions were blurring in his mind, crossing over the reality before him, hazy dreams or nightmares or imaginings. He could see hands clutching, reaching out, hands holding on to each other. He saw bright summer days and cozy winter nights. He saw blades and arrows and hammering smoke and flames. He saw colours, bright swirls of colour, sweets and treats, cakes and icing, and more colour by the 100 and 1,000. He saw smiles. He saw dark brown eyes. He saw white nothingness. And feathers falling all around him. Then he saw Erasmus lying beside him on the shore. He reached for the man, touching his face, and suddenly everything calmed. The vision stopped dancing, and he returned to the present moment. He called his name softly, Erasmus. But the prince was out of it completely. So, Darrow slung their bags over one shoulder and lifted the prince in his arms. He stood and he turned his back to the lake, walking on an instinct he did not understand. As the last of the feathers fell from him, drifting to the lake waters, they vanished. His mind conjured images of more feathers then, of feet leaving the ground, of carrying Erasmus high out of the trees into the sunlight. He let the visions pass as he walked, steadily on and on. He was hounded by cruel voices, images of futures and pasts, memories, and a huge sense of déjà vu. But he held his nerve as he held on to the prince. It felt cruel. The mist swirling around was cruel, mocking. The lake slowly faded away behind him, and with it went the sadness too. Now it was just him in the cruel mist. And Darrow was glad then that Erasmus was not awake to feel it. He still had no real sense of time. Had he walked for an hour, a minute, a day, his whole life? He couldn't tell. White swirled in his vision and would not leave. It ebbed away the forest around him, and feathers kept falling. There were none on his person anymore, left long since scattered by the side of that great lake, but he saw them still in his mind's eye, and the mist curled into their shape and lapped at his face. It was cruel, sadistic somehow. He could not explain it. He'd felt it before, he knew that much. He'd faced this feeling and come out on the other side. How else could he remember it now? And so he kept on walking, just 1 foot in front of the other, over and over. He could keep on going. And as long as Erasmus slept, he would not face it. He would not feel this tugging, tearing right through him, scratching into his insides and baring all his worst parts. The worst things he'd ever thought, the worst things he'd ever done, the worst he'd ever felt. It all laid bare before him in a carousel of cacophony. He could not breathe, he could not speak, he could only walk on and on as the mist reminded him and told him there was worse yet to come. He remembered things he had never seen before. He saw things he barely remembered. It all flashed in the cruelty, in the mocking, and so it kept on going. Sometimes all he saw was white expanses of nothing. Sometimes all he saw was black, inky black, like the bottom of that lake where he'd found Erasmus. He couldn't remember much, only a feeling. The feeling of absolute heartbreak. The feeling of sadness he could not remember ever feeling before, but somehow he knew it was the worst he would ever feel in his whole life. Time passed by like an illusion, but slowly the visions, the memories, the thoughts, the feelings began to fade away. And the mist faded too. It cleared, and he came into lighter woodland. He could see the sun. Looking up, blinking, squinting into it, he worked out swiftly which direction was north, and began to follow it. That way led to the capital. That way led to answers for the prince curled in his arms. Erasmus woke up when the campfire was lit. The area sat for the night. Darrow was beside him. Of course he was. Neither of them said anything, as brown eyes blinked open. They both looked, and in an instant their arms were around each other, hugging tight for such a long time. So many things passed between them, unsaid, unspoken, and soon they would be vocalized, but not yet. All they needed was touch, just then. They only broke apart when both of their stomachs began to growl. Laughing softly, they both tucked into the simple meal Darrow had foraged for them. It was a comfortable night, companionable, quiet. They could see the moon, they could see the stars. And they sat for a long time just watching the skies above them, both quietly glad they could see the sky again. Erasmus asked first. He asked about the lake. Darrow, what did you see down there? I couldn't find you. I was searching for so long. And then, there you were. What did you see? Darrow explained. It was simple. Nothing. Just dark water and feathers. Nothing else. Just black. I went under and it was black. I hung there and it was black. I couldn't see anything really. Just feel the feathers round me, and I felt sad. Like horrible sad. Like desperate sad. And lonely. So lonely. Like being lost and all on your own. It was so sad. I couldn't explain it though. Just real sad. Darrow looked the prince over then. What did you see? I felt it too. The sadness. It drew you in. I dived in after you, and then I found the bottom, and there was reeds, and I turned for the surface, but then it was gone, and I just went down looking for you, and it was dark, so dark, and it went on for..." The prince remembered slowly. "Years, Darrow. I felt I was down there for years. I could see my skin change, my hair. I felt weak and old, and like I was going to die any moment, to drown, to choke on water, but it never happened, and I kept looking for you. I searched, and years went by, decades even. It must have been 50 at least. And then..." He paused. An image, a memory rippled back into his mind's eye. That pale tomb at the bottom of the lake. How could he begin to explain it? "What is it? What do you see down there? Erasmus, tell me, what do you see?" He could not tell Darrow. Of course he had to. So the prince swallowed and tried his best. "I found the bottom of the lake. At least I think that's what it was. And you were not there, at least not at first. But it felt awful. It was cold and so sad, and there was a tomb, Darrow, and it was mine." "What?" "It must have been some sort of vision, a nightmare, something. There was so much chaos down there. I don't know quite what I saw. I thought it was real, but it can't have been. It was a dream. I don't know. But then I found you, and here we are." He didn't say anything yet about the bargain he'd struck. They were both so freaked out, he decided maybe he shouldn't. And there was also a huge part of the prince hoping that that had all just been another trick or nightmare. So instead, he decided to ask something else. "Darrow, what is the meaning of Cedar Leaf?" The assassin grew just a little pink around the cheeks and asked immediately, "Why?" "Well..." And the prince paused. He didn't know why, but something told him not to mention the tomb again for a while. It felt so heartbreakingly sad. Your mother said something about it to you, and you looked... I'm not sure. The expression on your face was interesting, I suppose. Call it curiosity. What does it mean?" Darrow sighed. But it wasn't a frustrated sigh, it was more of a "where do I even begin?" sigh. Well, it's part of her language, the Fae language. It's all based on plants and flowers and stuff. You can sort of disentangle it a little bit if you know what you're looking for. Cedar leaf, it means, well, it literally means I live for thee. Like, I live for you. And, it's a name. Well, sort of. It's a name for, a lover. A partner. Like a life partner. Someone you really, really love. You can say it as like, you are my Cedar Leaf, or good morning, Cedar Leaf, or like a descriptive, you know? They both sat with that for a moment. Erasmus, not quite sure what he'd been expecting, but it certainly wasn't that. He stared, brown eyes widening, looking into blue. It was the assassin this time who broke the silence. He tried desperately to explain, to claw something back, though his heart was screaming at him. She meant you. But not like... I don't... Not yet. I can't explain it. Look, we've barely known each other a few months. I can't explain properly. It's just a feeling. It hits me sometimes. Like, I'm certain about you. Certain I know you, or I should know you. Kind of like I can't help it. And I know it don't make any sense, but I can't make it go away. It's crazy and way too soon and insane, but like, in the future, if we are still, like, you know, in each other's company, I can imagine it. I can imagine calling you that. He faltered into silence and began rapidly staring at his shoes. The prince, sitting opposite him, was absolutely touched. I think I would like that. You're right. If we are still in each other's company, a little ways down the road, I should like to be your Cedar Leaf, Darrow. I should like that very much. They slept, holding hands that night, close and cosy around the campfire. But dreams still crept in. Darrow dreamed of white, vast emptiness. And then he was screaming Erasmus's name into the void, and then dancing with him in a starlit clearing surrounded by tall trees, then screaming his name again. Erasmus dreamed of blue eyes and a smile, and feathers falling around him in the water. They spent another couple of weeks travelling north, until finally they exited the trees. They found a road and decided to follow it but not walk upon it, keeping close enough to watch where they were going, but out of the way should anyone see them. Once they'd found the road, finding a town was relatively simple. They followed the road north, 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 and then they hit it. It was small and grotty, but it would do them fine. They got themselves a room in an old tavern and settled down by a cosy fire to talk and plan. Erasmus picked up a discarded newspaper and gasped. Darrow, look at the date. They both stared at it, inked in black on the white page, and they both realised what it meant. Time truly had been strange in that forest. Officially, and out in the real world, it had been 5 months since the night they met, though it felt to them a great deal longer now. They settled in for the night, staring around, not quite able to comprehend the reality that was now, well, all around them. The tavern was real, the seats were real, the table was real, the food they ate was real, but it felt strange still. They decided to make a plan, and Erasmus said he knew where to start. Once again, thank you for listening to this part of the OC story. And once again, there is a vote happening in the comment section down below. Your vote this week is simple, everyone. What would you like? Bad or worse? Let me know in the comment section down below. And thank you as always for joining in with this absolute chaos.